Good morning, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar entitled Sustainable Choices to Trusted Claims, Engaging with the Conscious Consumer. I'm Tracy Banks, I'm the BRC Climate Action Programme Manager, and today we are joined by BSI, the UK National Standards Body, and Miton Food Group, manufacturers to Morrisons supermarkets, who will be presenting over the next 45 minutes and then taking your questions at the end. So this webinar forms part of the BRC's climate action work, driven by our Climate Action Roadmap initiative, supporting our members to achieve the ambition of a net zero retail sector by 2040. So we work with retailers on 5 pathways: data, buildings, logistics, sourcing and people. And to help retailers achieve their goals in these pathways, the roadmap's purpose is threefold. So we work with governments and stakeholders to create the right policy and regulatory landscape to succeed in decarbonisation. We bring members together to share industry best practice, and we bring on board commercial partners who can advise on and deliver the practical solutions to enable progress and innovation. So today we're combining 2 of the 3 by hosting a BRC associate member, BSI, who've been working with BRC member Morrisons, who will today be sharing how retailers can successfully verify their sustainability claims with the BSI Kitemark, and the real-world impact of its implementation in Morrisons' Better for Our Planet eggs to create a 60% reduction in carbon. So why are we talking about sustainability certifications? Well, they've become increasingly important in today's world as consumers and organisations alike strive to adopt more sustainable practices. Certifications not only act as a baseline for sustainability practices and products, but also foster trust with consumers. So this event will introduce key BSI carbon reduction standards, specifically the ISOs for greenhouse gases in the carbon footprint of products and climate change management in the transition to net zero, as well as bringing to life a real-world example of certification implementation and the resulting carbon reduction achieved by a BRC member organisation. So let me introduce today's speakers. From BSI, we welcome Richard Werran. Richard serves as BSI's Global Director of Consumer, Retail and Food, driving and accelerating BSI's global food assurance portfolio worldwide. And his influence extends particularly over regions like the UK, Ireland, Middle East, Africa and Turkey to redefine food safety and quality assurance. And from Morrisons Miton Food Group, we welcome Molly Airstone, who works with both customers and producers at Chippendale Foods, part of the Miton Food Group. Molly's focus is on building relationships across the business and joining up both ends of the farm to fork journey. So a few housekeeping rules before we start. First of all, as attendees, your microphones are muted and your cameras are off. We have a questions tab in the bottom right-hand corner where you can submit questions throughout the webinar, and we'll get to them in a Q&A session at the end, but please do ask your questions throughout. And if you wouldn't mind staying on at the end, you'll be redirected to a quick 2-minute survey that'll help us deliver valuable events in the future. So without further ado, I'm going to kick us off with a couple of questions for the audience to get our sustainability credentials thoughts flowing. So on your screen, you will see a poll where you can select your answer. Once you've answered and the pop-out disappears, you'll be able to see the poll results in the bottom tab on the right-hand side. If not immediately, then you can click on the eye icon. So question 1 is, how important is offering sustainability products to your business strategy? A, very important. B, moderately important. C, slightly important. D, not important at all. So if you want to select your answer, submit your vote, and then you can look at the results coming in the poll icon, in the poll tab. Just getting a number in now. Great. So I'll just summarise for those that can't see. Essentially, we have almost 60% very important, 40% moderately important, and we have 2% slightly important. Thank you very much for that. So then moving on, our second poll. What is the biggest challenge your business faces in offering sustainable products? A, higher costs associated with sustainable products. B, limited supplier options. C, lack of customer awareness or demand, D, difficulty in verifying sustainability claims, or E, other. If you have an other you'd like to share with us, please mention that in the question tab on the right hand side. So again, a range of votes coming in. Let's just give it a second to settle. So broadly, again, we have the highest response for the top answer. So 52% higher costs associated with sustainable products, 26% difficulty in verifying sustainability claims, 12% limited supplier options, 5% lack of customer awareness or demand, and then we have a couple of others, which I will just see if there's any comments in the chat. Bear with me. So one comment is around jumping through the hoops needed, textiles exchange for global recycling standard. There is very little guidance and just lots of documents and manuals. Thank you, Hayley. So I suppose, thank you for participating in those polls. What these confirm is that there is increasing strategic importance for retailing sustainable products, but a number of real challenges for retailers in getting these to market and achieving the desired outcomes, sustainability outcomes and impact. So to walk us through the insights around these perceived barriers and to market and dive into the certifications as a mechanism for building customer trust, I'll hand over to Richard from BSI.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you very much indeed. First of all, a big warm welcome from us, and thank you for joining this webinar today, because those poll questions are precisely what we aim to tackle, and we've done the hard research so you don't have to. So we think we've got the answers that you might be looking for when you're wanting to address sustainability, which by and large everybody is trying to do so. I've got quite a few slides to get through, so we'll be going at a fair old rate. The presentation will be available afterwards, and we of course here through email and so forth to contact us later if you should so wish. So one slide, a little bit about BSI. If you've not come across us before, we are your national standards body. So every nation has one. We're it for the United Kingdom, and we represent the UK at ISO in Switzerland. And indeed, we were a founding member of ISO. We're also a signatory of the UN Global Compact and support the United Nations UN SDGs. So I will move on from that slide and get into the essentials. Now, you're going to see this slide pop up from time to time. So whenever you see the little nutshell symbol, this will be your key takeaway from that part of that section that we've just been through. So I was asked, well, just clarify in a nutshell what the difference is between carbon neutral and carbon net zero is. And here it is in one slide. So on one slide, you'll see that, that carbon neutrality is much more of a short-term time frame, whereas going carbon net zero is long-term. And carbon net zero requires reducing emissions by a minimum of 90% and covering all three scopes, which is the intended focus of net zero. And it usually requires some significant changes to the way a business is actually operating. Whereas carbon neutral does allow, for example, offsetting. It can be verified through various standards like PAS 2060. Which is going to be replaced in November next year by ISO 14068. So that's moved from a publicly available specification to a full ISO standard, which we're very pleased to say. And it often involves fewer operational changes. So they are different, but they do coexist quite nicely. So in a nutshell, net zero refers to the goal of eliminating, whereas carbon neutrality is achieved by reducing. Both are required to reduce the impact of climate change. And what they are trying to do, of course, is get towards climate neutrality, the shared goal. And we have the tools that we believe you might like to have to assist you with that journey. So we've done quite a lot of research in and around this subject. And from a consult survey just 2 years ago, 60% of consumers don't actually know or can fully define what carbon neutral actually is, or if they try, they get it wrong. Around about 50% say they've changed their behavior, some or a lot, because of climate concerns, but they were able to define the term correctly. 23% said environmental claims are a factor when they're choosing which food or which food brand product to buy. Be interesting, if we went back just 10 years, I think the responses, of course, would have been entirely different. So the awareness about the importance of sustainability and the choices that consumers make has changed greatly. So in a nutshell, it's important to engage and communicate with consumers clearly to make sustainable choices. Let's look at consumer attitudes and who, in fact, is responsible. Now, you might not be able to see all of those labels to those columns because the screen might be a little small, but you will get the slides later. But I'm going to pick out some top three columns from that bar chart. And this was from a great report from Statista called Consumer Insights and Sustainability Consumption just a year ago. So the top three consumer responses: consumers feel 41% feel they can contribute to tackling environmental problems. 38% feel that sustainability shouldn't actually be a luxury. And 31%, just a third of consumers, feel that companies are responsible for solving global sustainability. So interesting, probably no great surprises there, but it confirms everything that we've been thinking through this research that we've done. In a nutshell, top three consumer responses: consumers believe companies are accountable and seek affordable sustainability solutions. So let's look at what's in the way and some things that are around consumer attitudes. Again, this was a Statista report from a year ago where we're looking at the barriers to buying sustainable food and beverages in the UK. And the top three, it's not on that slide for some reason, but the top three: they're too expensive, or I prefer products that I've always bought, or the products don't have a sustainability friendly option. The take home message here from consumers is, I'm willing to buy familiar products if they're sustainable and priced right. Let's look at target segments. Shoppers who buy sustainable food and beverages in the UK. I was quite disappointed by this when I saw the Statista report, because I'm one of the last boomers, I suppose, and only 50% of my generation are actually interested in buying sustainable food. But if you talk to my daughter, she's in Generation Z, it's a really big priority. So again, younger people are having much more importance associating what they buy in terms of sustainability. But the thing is, and this is important to remember, that sustainability will gather pace as the population ages. This is an old chestnut. So will consumers pay more? So we've done a lot of research around this. And there is a poll that I will now ask you to complete. And this is all about what price. So how much more would a UK consumer pay for sustainably sourced food? Not a penny more, 5% more, 10%, or more than 10%. So submit your vote now, if you would, please. That's great. Good. So we can identify that some people are prepared to pay more. In fact, 5% of us on this call at the moment think that 57% So 57% will pay 5% more. Let's look and see what we found. So the results were interesting, and this was a Deloitte report that came out in 2021, that 13% are prepared to pay more than 10%, 20% are prepared to pay 10% more, and 36% are prepared to pay 5% more. So in a nutshell, 70% of consumers are prepared to pay more. And this begs the question, yes, but by how much? So we all have cost of living pressures bearing down on us, but PricewaterhouseCoopers report, the Voice of the Consumer survey from earlier this year, suggested that some consumers say they're willing to spend 9.7% more on average for sustainably produced or sourced goods. But this is all about building brand trust. And when an organization makes good on promises and delivers on them, that is the best way to deliver brand trust and convey positive intent and demonstrate competence at the same time. And if we map this across to those important buying behaviors of Gen Z and millennials, 15% are more likely than older generations to spend more money on sustainable branded products and choose it over their competitors. Certainly my daughter Katie would very much fit into that group in Generation Z. So the 30% more likely than older generations to spend more, and 20% more likely to pick that brand over others. So sustainability is very much of an issue, and that comes back to the first poll questions that we ran at the very beginning. And it's great to see that sustainability is very much on everybody's agenda. So in a nutshell, trust drives behavior and ultimately business outcomes. Sustainability promotes trust, particularly amongst the younger generations, and the younger generations will soon have the most purchasing power. Now, the boring but important bit, of course, are EU regulations, and we have EU Directive 2024/825, which is all about preventing greenwashing and assisting proper claims when it comes to sustainability offerings. And Article 4 states that such claims should be verified, by a third-party expert who should be independent from the trader, free from any conflicts of interest, with experience and competence in environmental issues, and who should be able to monitor the progress of the trader regularly. And Article 7 reiterates the fact that it should be carried out by a competent third party, but also that party should demonstrate compliance with international standards such as ISO 17065, which BSI, of course, does. We enable that sustainable choice through two essential offerings for organizations that want to go down the net zero pathway or pursue carbon neutral products supported by the BSI's own mark of trust that's been around for 120 years and is part of our nation's fabric. In actual fact, when you walk to school, you probably walked over manhole covers with the Kitemark embossed into the steel. You'll see it on fire extinguishers. It will even be in the glass and the windscreen of your dad's car. So it's very much part of our nation's fabric, our nation's heritage, and something that we've grown up with and we have come to know and trust. So about the carbon neutral Kitemark, it's a very busy slide, that one. I'll just pick out those 2 points: that it's based on ISO 14067, which uses life cycle assessment to quantify carbon footprint, because there's lots of different ways of assessing carbon footprints. And in fact, the chances are you may pick the wrong one and then end up in a horrible position of having to justify why you chose that particular method of counting carbon in the way you did and defending it internally and externally. So that's not a good place to be. So using 14067 really does make good sense. And then BS 14068 2023, which is a guidance document all about achieving net zero through management practices. Then we have the net zero pathway, which is getting a lot of industry attention at the moment. It's an overarching scheme. It's not a standard. It uses 14064, which is an accredited standard for carbon footprint. And we also bring in the requirements of IWA 42/2022, and this outlines the requirements for ISO net zero and best practice. A little bit about the Kitemark. As I said, it's been around an awful long time. 80% of consumers are more confident in products that carry the Kitemark than ones that don't. And 70% of consumers in the UK recognise the Kitemark, which is absolutely massive. And 53% of consumers said they would spend more on a product which bore the Kitemark with up to 15% price premium. And this was research that was carried out by YouGov. 52% of consumers think products with the Kitemark have better reputations than other products. So you can see the credence that the Kitemark actually lends to a product. There have been instances where companies have got it wrong, and we're here to help you get it right. And there's just 3 instances, for example, Delta Airlines, Brewdog, and how the German courts have come down on carbon claims of all types I think in a very good way, so that consumers aren't misled. Here are some products that you may be familiar with, particularly Lenovo computers, like the one I happen to be working on at the moment, which is Kitemarked carbon neutral. And of course, Morrisons, that you'll hear all about from Molly shortly, which will be a story for her to tell, and the journey that they took to create carbon neutral eggs. If you'd like to know more, then we have our own toolkit, which is freely available to you. So if you've got your smartphone out and you have the camera on, you can scan that code and download the toolkit. But last but not least, the importance of supermarkets. And this demonstrates the power of retailers, because the likelihood of private label products, people buying them, people are going to be buying them. You can see here, 60%, 30% somewhat likely to very likely. So that's 90% of the population is either somewhat or very likely to be buying products, own label products from supermarkets. So supermarkets really do have the pole position to really drive the sustainability agenda throughout the industry. That's all you're going to hear from me until the questions later on. And at this point, I'll hand over to Molly.
Thanks very much, Richard, and thanks everyone for joining today. I'm just going to take you through only a couple of slides, not too laborious, but just kind of to outline what we've done and how we've done it. So first of all, I'll just take you through a bit of a timeline. I would stress these things don't happen very quickly. So we started our first journey with this back in 2019. Then moved for the BSI Kitemark in December 2023, and have just recently had our first continuous assessment this month for our annual Kitemark assessment. So it's a journey, is what I kind of want to stress, and we've learned a lot of different things along the way, whether that be how we calculate certain things or how we market certain things in some of the Morrisons stores, how we communicate this to consumers, but also agriculture is a huge part of obviously my job and the egg industry. So we've got to be conscious of how we communicate this to the egg industry and egg producers as well. So I think we've taken the long approach, and again, we've learned along the way and made sure that we've done the reductions and then got the Kitemark. I think it's easy to jump in, want to do everything super fast and get a product in store or on a shelf. And I think we've definitely valued the approach of let's do the baby steps first. Let's go out with one product, which was the Better for Our Planet eggs. Let's learn and take the learnings from that to advise us moving forwards. So how have we got here today? Data and baselines is the number one most important thing that we've got to factor in when we're going through either a BSI process or any carbon reduction projects, either on farm or in our own operations. So 70% of the footprint of an egg when it is laid by a hen is feed. So we've had to do a lot of almost scrutiny of the numbers and a lot of review of the baselines and how that baseline is made up of certain factors and inputs to the farm to be able to target really specific either projects or calculations to then go on and improve that footprint. So first approach to improving the footprint we took is kind of look at what we've already got, look at how we can make it more efficient, whether that is making our feed conversion rate more efficient or our energy usage more efficient, kind of without going all into either big investments or big changes or kind of making some significant steps forward. Let's try and look at the whole process end to end and see how we can reduce that. So from an on-farm point of view, that included kind of looking at the carbon sequestration from the hen's range, really going into detail about the feed. This particular farm we've got is all homegrown cropped. So that was a really controlled environment for us to be able to monitor, review, measure, and then take that learnings forward. And then we kind of go on to, after we've done everything we can and got the most efficient process as physically possible, what reduction projects can we then either look at, implement, have a forward view of this to make sure that we are 4, 5, 10 years down the line, making sure that we've got projects lined up in our action plan. These kind of looked at everything from renewable energy sources, diet changes with the hens, looking at how we could do some more in-depth soil sampling, things like that are additions to what we've already got and can take that time. I know kind of one project we looked at with the feed was kind of a 12 to 18 month process. So patience is key. You don't get it right first time, but it's about being really resilient and kind of focusing on the end goal, which kind of helped us a lot along the way. We got to a point where we'd done all of our calculations, had kind of product that we were confident in and ready to go. So we then approached BSI for our carbon neutral Kitemark approval, which again takes time. We were the first business to get BSI approved, so definitely a learning journey for us. But we really valued BSI support and having the Kitemark itself. I think it gave us a lot more confidence in the numbers. I'll be really open and honest. We were potentially too cautious with our numbers in the first round. And when we went through the whole BSI approval, which includes multiple audits to go through every single number on our whole process and supply chain, our initial carbon number came down because we'd almost been quite risk averse and quite hesitant to begin with because we wanted to get this right and we didn't want to mislead consumers. We didn't want to have any of those almost negative connotations around a product that we've seen in previous businesses. So that was really important to us. And then we've obviously got the action plans, knowledge sharing, and almost what happens after BSI. So we have got an annual review, an assessment, and that holds a very big commitment to reduce the footprint year on year, which again is another reason why consumers respect the Kitemark, because it holds businesses to account for reducing it, not only just going out and saying you've got a carbon neutral product, but making sure you are continuously working on that. And I think it was really important to us across our egg supply chain to prove a concept and to prove to producers that actually we've got previously 1, now 2 farms that can achieve this, and we've got a plan that has worked previously. Now there's so many different ways to get to net zero, to get to carbon neutrality, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't go full flog and say, actually, well, we're going to get 50% of our producer base covered, or 90% of our producer base covered. So it was so much easier to almost go, right, let's start with 1 farm, let's do it in detail, take the time, so we can then pass that knowledge on to the rest of our internal, but also our external supply chain with our producers. And just, again, something to stress, this process is completely cradle to grave. So that includes how consumers use this product when they go and buy eggs from our store and take it back to the home, to literal antibiotics that potentially the hens have had in their lifetime, the breed of hen. So it's a truly end-to-end process, and I think that's the beauty of BSI making sure we get that right. Because there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of change that can go on in a business in a year. And it was comforting for us to have someone to ring on the other end of the phone to say, look, this is happening. The hens have produced more eggs or less eggs, or we need to do something a bit different here. And to have the confidence that we've got people from BSI on the end of the phone that can answer all our questions on that, and almost be the true experts that we need in that field, was really valuable to us. So enough of me yabbering. I know everyone actually wants to see the hard work that went on farm to get here. So we've just popped a short video in that we have done for advertising and marketing reasons for Morrisons, but it shows you a little bit more about the producer and the hard work he did to get us here.
My name's Hugh Carter. We're on a mixed farm just outside Trundon Village, which is in County Durham. So we currently have 60,000 layers, which produce 19 million eggs a year, and 100% of those go to Chippendales. Yeah, we first started supplying Chippendales in 2007. At that point we had 13,000 hens, and we've steadily increased to the 60,000, and they've always gone to Chippendales because we've had a good working relationship with them. We supply in the carbon neutral eggs, so they're fed on a non-soya diet, and they also fed on black soldier fly insects from the Better Origin container. Combined with the solar panels, carbon sequestration from the woodlands, tree plantings and wildflower plantings, that allows us to get this carbon neutral status. We have 1,100 acres of arable, which we grow wheat, barley, oilseed rape and beans. The crops that we can use, we go into the hen feed, so we make our own rations. And then we're looking to get an oil press for the oilseed rape to use the rape oil, and the rape expeller to include in the rations also. So through encouragement or in partnership with Chippendales, we're looking to expand and build a 64,000 bird unit, and that will take us up to approximately 40 million eggs a year. And within that shed we put in a manure dryer to dry the manure, which uses the heat from the birds, and there'll also be a feed mill within that which will automatically feed the 64,000 birds using our homegrown produce.
Perfect. Hopefully all you enjoyed that. Sometimes people that aren't used to being around chickens so long get a bit freaked out with how many chicken noises go on in the background of that. But yeah, I just think it was really important for me to highlight that to get to this point today, we've basically kind of relied on other people in our supply chain, not just us wanting to have the passion for sustainability. And we were really proud to be able to take our producer Hugh to the National Egg and Poultry Awards and win a Innovation of the Year award for our BSI Kitemark product. So that was just a really nice kind of, not an end to the project because the project will never be finished, but definitely just kind of a nice way to celebrate the hard work that went on farm to get us to this stage. So yeah, I think I'll kind of leave it there, but all in all, a great learning for us. We've learned everything and anything about carbon neutrality along the way, about baselining, about making sure we've got all our data correct. And I think we've built up kind of a bank of tools to be able to move forward and then look at what's next for us, whether that's other farms in eggs or potentially other products within the group.
Thanks, Molly. And apologies, I think some of the audience weren't able to see the video. So Dylan, my colleagues, just kindly popped a link in the Livestorm platform where you can link to the video to watch it on YouTube. Apologies,
Okay.
not sure what happened there, but like technical hitch. But yeah, if you do, we'll also include a link to the video in the post-event email so that you'll have an opportunity to see that. So thank you to you both. If you did want to use the QR code on this slide to access BSI's Retail Toolkit, please go ahead. I'll just leave that on there for a second so you can pick that up. We're now going to move into a Q&A session. So essentially, if you do have any questions for either Richard or Molly, please do pop them in the chat. I will be picking up the questions and working through them as we go. So I'm just going to start with some questions that came on during Richard's presentation. So I'll direct these at you, Richard. This is a question from Liz. How does the EU directive affect the UK if we have left the EU?
It doesn't until you export products to the EU. Then it will. So that's the first thing. For us, it comes down to making misleading claims at the moment. But I would expect, because there's a certain mirroring still between us and the European Union, that in the fullness of time, we shall see a similar type of legislation that will come forth that will be similar to what we see in the European Union. And that would make sense because they're our closest trading partners. So I think at the moment it's important not to make misleading claims. I think it's important to make the right kind of choices when it comes to assessing carbon and also how you communicate that in not a misleading way.
Thanks, Richard. And then a question for both of you, I suppose, but it did come up during your presentation, Richard, one from Molly. Does having the kite mark on your product allow you to use phrases such as better for the planet, as your photo of the Morrisons egg box shows?
Okay, so I'll kick off with that one first. What the kite mark says is that it's not right or it's not wrong, but it's true. So it is a verification of the customer promise that Morrisons is making. And how they want to express that will be down to Morrisons' own marketing team to see exactly how that can actually translate into a consumer message that makes sense. Molly, if you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's that's kind of our brand name. You've got to be very careful kind of to not mislead consumers and to make sure kind of you don't go into 100% any absolute claims, and you can be as cautious as you want with that. But yeah, completely agree with what Richard said. I think it's definitely a balancing act, but if you're 100% true to consumers and make sure that there's no misleading claims.
I'd also add there's lots of different ways of calculating carbon. I think the last time I looked, there was at least 33 different ways. And the chances are that you might make the wrong choice. And you can make your own carbon assessment if you like, and you can make your own claims. And in our experience, private claims, if you like, that are made are usually open to attack from all sorts of organizations to say, well, have you included this? Have you forgotten that? So you're constantly defending it. So the beauty with this approach is that you're using international standards. And let's face it, when it's an ISO standard, 193 countries have actually signed off on that particular standard, which makes it international. And a lot of the standards start out as British standards, as you may know. So you have that rigor, that surety that you're actually using internationally accepted and accredited standards, which puts you in a very strong position to defend that, and also to communicate that with consumers, and also to engage with competent agencies and third parties. Also, having these kind of standards helps you to build in continual improvement. So as Molly hinted at, it is a journey. It will continue. There will be annual reductions in the amount of offsetting that Chippendales can actually do, because this is a process. It's not something that you can do from a Friday night to a Monday morning and fix everything up. We're working with seasonality, we're working with crops, and we're working with eggs in this particular instance. And that takes time to work all of that through in a very careful and really great way that Morrisons have done to shift away from soy, for example, to insects. So all of these things had to be put in place, and it's a process of improvement that is ongoing. And that is the beauty about having what they're doing within a independently audited and accredited and certified framework.
Thanks, Richard. Quite a nice segue in terms of mention of time for the next question. So I've got one from Beth. So great to hear about the project. What was the timeline for the total project? I think this one is a question for you.
That's fine. And I actually think it's quite a tricky one to answer, because we've had so many iterations. And I think, kind of like, as I did mention, it's ongoing. It's never going to be something that we get to a point and say, yeah, we've finished now. And I think people can probably do it a lot quicker than we did. Obviously, we did a lot of the groundwork, and then kind of as BSI was coming out with a carbon neutral Kitemark, went down that route. And again, we usually say kind of we spent a year working out how to do it on farm, and then probably another 9 months, 12 months with BSI to make sure we could go through all of the verification process and get it in store. So depends which way you look at it. And yeah, we were very much learning as we go. So potentially could take people much less time than it might have done to us.
But I think
I suppose it depends on product as well.
Yeah, we've got a live animal that we cannot tell how many eggs to produce a day, as much as we continue to try. I think it definitely changes in what sector you're in.
There were a couple of setbacks as well that I'm not sure that you mentioned, that there was at least 2 bouts of bird flu, which completely decimated the flocks. And I remember the calls coming through, oh no, that takes time to work that through. So those were setbacks that are product specific that you just have to work with. But the good news is that Molly and her team persevered and made it a reality, and then won an outstanding industry award for innovation. And I'm particularly thrilled about that for her and Morrisons.
Great. Next question. From Liz, how have sales changed with the introduction of the carbon neutral eggs? Do they outsell other eggs, i.e. caged eggs versus free range eggs, etc.?
Mm-hmm. So I think we've got to take it into account with kind of similar to Richard's bird flu comment, that we're also in a cost of living crisis. I'm completely fine with saying these eggs do retail for more than others, and I think it's definitely a balancing act in terms of how we market the eggs in store, which stores we put them in, what's the demographic around those stores, and where are they located. And we've definitely taken some learnings along the way. What I would say is that there's no current plan to take them out, and customers value them and customers do purchase them. Right now, I don't have a crystal ball to say what the next few years are going to be like. we are obviously making progress with all of our other producers in terms of their carbon footprints, but it's something that is selling. I think you've just got to be sensible and realistic in terms of who's the target audience for that product right now, and hopefully as all businesses progress in potentially similar manner, how the consumer wants, needs, and expectations might change over the next couple of years.
I think they're competitively priced at the moment. In our local Morrisons, they're being sold at 30 pence each. And when you think about it, you think, well, that's a lot for an egg. But if you multiply it up for half a dozen eggs, that's £1.80, which is actually cheaper than many other eggs. So when people do the comparison, then of course it competes extremely favourably with other eggs, maybe not the caged eggs, but it's certainly up there with the higher quality eggs that people expect, giving them a new option. Because let's face it, that this type of product has never been seen on the market before. So it's a new category of eggs. Yes, we've got free range. Yes, we've got barn eggs and, but now we've got carbon neutral eggs. This is a whole new segment for consumers to choose from when it comes to eggs.
Yeah, and so Morrisons on shelf eggs are 100% free range, so it's almost like Richard said, just giving them that bit extra choice. So yeah, definitely do sell, but yeah, just bear in mind either inflation conditions or economic conditions at the time, and you might need to do some thinking about just the how and the where.
But I think though, Molly, the fact is that they are competitively priced, so they're not completely out of the ballpark and out of the question. These are it's priced to be competitive and very accessible to consumers, to help them make the right sustainable choices, to align with their own personal values about what it is that they're going to buy. I mean, my daughter, she's very much of the mind that she will only buy products that align with her sustainability values. So she's much less aligned with brands, but more about what they stand for and whether they resonate with her own core values, which I think is a really good thing. So we're beginning to see this shift. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Next question from James. Does the mark take the packaging of the eggs into account?
Yeah, absolutely. So our eggs currently in store are loose. So they go in cardboard boxes on pulp trays, and then the customer will almost hand pick the eggs into their own half dozen egg box, but all of that end to end. So when I was talking about cradle to grave, all of that's taken into account. And even kind of all of the packaging transport from supplier to locations and everything like that. So yeah, it's in, I want to say as much detail as possible, but in great detail. Yeah, extremely.
I think that was a really great question, and one that we haven't had before. So whoever it was that asked that question, that was a really great one. Thank you.
And was that just a follow on from that? Was that a consideration in terms of them being on trays? Was that a consideration as part of that Kitemark work in terms of how you presented them to the consumer?
Yeah, I think so. In Morrison stores, they're on loose tables at the back of the stores that they're in, which gives us a little bit more room in terms of telling the story and making sure the message is out. So yeah, that was kind of a big consideration in that sense.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a question for you, Molly, from Simon. What percentage of the overall Morrisons annual sales of eggs is certified if the supplier's max is 19 million, growing up to 40 million?
That is a very testing question on percentages. So what I will say is that we've got two of our producers currently certified, and the way we work this with BSI is that we certify that product rather than certifying a whole number of eggs. We could go down the route of certifying all of our producers, but because the producer element of our footprint is so huge, the work on farm is really key to this. So in terms of making sure that we're doing the end to end, but also means that we kind of have a pool of eggs that we can put into this product, if that makes sense. Don't know off the top of my head what it is as percentage of Morrisons' annual sales, but I'm sure one of our buyers does so. But yeah, we've got 2 producers in a producer group of roughly about 65 producers.
Okay, and is there a plan for either scaling up your work around kite marking within eggs or across different products?
Yeah, so we're definitely looking at it. We have actually just recently in the last 2 months increased that. So we've gone from having 1 farm or 1 flock kite marked to 2 flocks kite marked. Again, reevaluating reevaluating all the time what the future might hold for that. 100% appreciate that for things like this, it can be tricky for some businesses to do it without a consumer demand. So it's almost kind of we've got to do the work on farm regardless. We've got to meet our net zero targets, and also we'll see how that plans out in terms of how we translate that into products and to consumers as we go along the journey. But yeah, it's really nice to be able to say that this year we've increased the amount of stores this is in, and also increased the amount of egg that we've got certified.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think the key thing is that Morrisons have begun. They've made a clear step forward in the journey that they're taking, and I think, you know, looking at the way that these things go, I think by 2030 this product will be quite normal in the industry. So I think we'll see the industry change to more sustainability, sustainable practices, hopefully Kitemark products, so consumers can make those choices. But my sense is that it's going to become normal. At the moment, it's a certain interest and uniqueness about the product, but everything starts off with being special and unusual in a certain way, but over time it becomes a normal product.
Okay, thank you. I've got one final question for you, Molly. What was the biggest challenge you had to overcome in getting the Better for Our Planet eggs to achieve carbon neutrality?
So I think probably what I would say the biggest challenge is almost how we have managed change within that. So kind of how we look at a product which is a moving feast, and such kind of a biological product, it's not almost a certain supply chain, whether that being even chickens producing eggs in the first place, whether that being the hens deciding what size of egg they want to produce, the life cycle of a flock, all of that kind of like biological impacts, as Richard mentioned, like potential AI risks and stuff like that. So I think the biggest challenge for us was how to marry that up and match that up almost with the certifications and with the kite marks, knowing that we have to forecast things as bob on as we physically can, but also in our annual reviews go back and actually say, well, did that change? How do we have any of the circumstances changed? Do we need to readjust that going forward? So I think it's almost the process of managing an uncertain biological process and life cycle to a very black and white standard.
As an outsider, I would say the challenge of managing sales, marketing, and operations altogether was really quite a remarkable feat that took a multidisciplinary group of selected individuals to really drive this project, to really own that project from beginning to end and say, we're going to make this happen, and have that determination to persevere, and it's really paid off. So That's what I could see as an outsider, Molly.
And one for you, Richard, just to finish off with, if you could give me kind of like a short answer for those listening who want to understand how standards can help reduce the carbon footprints of their products. Where should they start?
Well, the best place to start would be to go to BSI website and download the relevant standards that we've been talking about, like ISO 14067 and ISO 14068. So those are the two real standards that you need to get your head around and understand those. Talk to us. I'm always here. Just ping me. We're very happy to talk with anybody about how to go about this, and whether they want to take that extra step and have it kite marked. That's another opportunity for organisations to talk with us about. But get the chill kit, download it. I'm one of those people that have got to print things off because I just read things better when I've got it in my hand rather than on the screen. Digest it. Discuss it within your organization about what might be possible. But the beauty of doing this is being able to help your marketing teams substantiate claims, put yourself in a really strong position, and be able to report on your progress towards carbon neutrality in, say, your annual report. Many of us have to report to senior leadership teams, boards, and they want to know what kind of progress they're making. And when they see this is really evidential progress that they're making as a business towards carbon neutrality or carbon net zero through the pathway, it really gives organizations that good feeling that they're getting traction on what is quite a difficult topic within a ISO standards framework, which allows for continual improvement.
Great, thank you, Richard. Conscious of time, now we're going to wrap up there in terms of the question and answers. So I'd like to thank Richard for educating us on the BSI Kitemark certification, and for Molly for explaining its use for driving operational carbon reduction and consumer trust. So we hope that the content has given you direction and food for thought on the role of sustainability certifications in your business, and provided you with some takeaways to action internally with suppliers or with customers. In our post-event email, we'll be sharing the slides and an on-demand link for playback of the webinar, and also a link to the video that you may have missed. Apologies for that. And on screen now, I'm just sharing 2 QR code links to upcoming sustainability events. Next week, we're hosting an in-person BRC Nature Day to kick off our focus on nature and biodiversity. And there's another in-person event in January, which is our annual Sustainability Horizon Scan in the form of regulatory updates and interactive workshops. So with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us today and for participating with all your questions. Special thanks to Dylan and team in the background for our technical support. And if you could stay on for just a minute after the webinar closes to complete the feedback form, I would encourage you to let us know of any specific topics we could cover in future events to support your business in your journey to net zero. So please do mention those on your feedback form. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you.